All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Hello and welcome once again to the Read Rothbard Podcast. My name is Daniel, and Robert is with me. How are you doing, Robert?
I'm just sitting here playing with myself.
Like a deck of cards or something else?
Sure.
Awesome. Good to know. Well, hey, Robert, Merry Christmas.
Thanks, buddy. Same to you, even though it was me that sent you that thing and not the other way around. Even though it was your idea, even though I did a thing still. Did it.
Yeah, now I'm confused. That's okay, though. So,
You're not the only one.
Yeah, I know. So, Robert, our last show was about idiocracy.
It was?
Yeah, it was. And during that, we did talk a little bit about Ross Ulbricht, the Dread Pirate Roberts of Silk Road, and whether... Oh, wait. No, we didn't talk about that. God damn it. I just screwed this whole thing up.
There for a second. I was like, what?
All right, backtrack with me.
Back in time. Let's do it.
You talked about whether Facebook would be liable in some way or fashion or have some responsibility to police the news that is presented therein. And you were...
No.
Yeah, you were making the argument that no, there's no precedent for that. No positive obligation. Yet, there's a parallel here with Silk Road, where they're saying by providing the medium, he was, in fact, responsible for what was transacted there. Even though he was not engaged in any technical wrongdoing or legal wrongdoing, because he provided a venue for exchange that was of quote-unquote illegal substances, there is now legal precedent, court law, that says that providing the venue, merely the venue, does have a positive obligation. So I'm doing a very ham-handed transition from idiocracy and that conversation to this conversation, which is about Silk Road and the Dread Pirate Roberts, which then led us to The Princess Bride, which is what this show is going to be about.
Holy shit. That is some serious 6 degrees of separation. All right.
Where's Kevin Bacon?
Let me just throw in, if that is true, what you just said is true, not the whole 6 degrees, but if that logic and rationale is true, if you can be guilty by providing a platform whereupon crimes are committed, whereupon things bad happen. So if I make a CNN.com and down in the comment section somebody threatens to kill somebody, is now CNN.com guilty of providing a platform for a death threat? If I'm a cement company manufacturer and I make cement and my cement makes a building and that building like really hard, and somebody like trips and falls and cracks their skull open on a piece of the cement. Am I guilty of making a thing that has made a thing happen? If I'm a gun manufacturer and then someone takes one of my guns, buys one of my guns voluntarily, and goes and shoots and kills somebody, am I now guilty or partially guilty of that murder? I think it's a very slippery slope and completely wrong and which is why we as libertarians, or whatever you want to call us, voluntarist anarchists, we separate things from a voluntary versus coerced angle. So things when they're voluntary are not crimes. Is that an oversimplification? You know what I'm talking about? I'm trying to talk here, Daniel.
I've been trying to interrupt you for the last 30 seconds.
Well, shit, do it.
Yeah, so I agree with you. These are interesting questions, and I think from a libertarian anarcho-capitalist standpoint, there is no positive obligation. There's no founding or reason for these things to actually be crimes. But in court cases and in current, monopolized law, there are actually people who are trying to sue gun manufacturers for creating guns that people then go out and use the tool. They use the item. And I think, I don't know if
so should we also hold, sorry, I'm going to barge right over you. Should we also hold hammer manufacturers for all hammer-related murders? Knife manufacturers for all knife-related murders?
Yeah, exactly.
Where does it end, Daniel?
Where does it end? And I think in Libertopia, it pretty much ends at negligence. You know, if somebody, like you're saying, the cement manufacturer, if somebody owns that property and then they're going to have people there and it's an unsafe environment, or let's say it appears to be safe, but like, say the railing isn't very sturdy and somebody leans on it and falls, certainly the owner of that property does bear responsibility for that injury, for that accident, right?
Does the cement manufacturer also bear some responsibility?
Unless they did something negligent, unless they created whatever that structure was and it was faulty. So like their poor craftsmanship resulted in a dangerous environment that injured somebody, and maybe it wasn't something that was purely visible. Like, I mean, we all inherently have an individual responsibility for our own personal safety. But if you are in an environment that appears to be a safe environment and then something structurally fails, causing an injury, then, yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of blame to go around, right? Like the owner of said property, whoever created it, whoever manufactured it, constructed it, et cetera. I mean, it boils down to who's actually at fault for creating something that's failed. You know that this would be managed in an insurance-type fashion, right?
Well, since you seem to be some sort of a non-expert, as well as I am, on current legal proceedings, do you understand the current line of thinking in the court world where, like, a thief will break into a guy's house and injure himself, and that it's somehow the property owner's fault?
I have heard of this, yeah.
Yeah, like the guy's, like, creeping into a guy's house, falls through a skylight, and then stabs himself on some knife that's been laid out or left out on, like, a kitchen table. Then he sues the homeowner.
Yeah, I have heard of something like that, and it was rather recently. I don't know if it was an actual, like, story, like a news story, fake or otherwise, or if it was something from a film or somebody raising a point in a discussion. I don't recall exactly. But clearly, the person was not supposed to be there. They initially violated somebody else's property rights by even being there. So to think that they can then, in turn, sue somebody for having a dangerous environment when they weren't invited to be there certainly is not a legitimate claim.
Yeah, there's two things I want to bring up. One, there's also the McDonald's case, which was a loser. McDonald's lost, of the lady who spilled coffee on her lap and burned herself.
Oh, yeah.
So she voluntarily purchased the coffee. She knew it was hot, and then she goes and spills it on herself. Accident. Blames McDonald's for the coffee being too hot and wins big lawsuit. What do you think of that one?
I think if the coffee was ridiculously hot, like hotter than any coffee should ever be, then maybe there's some standing. But if it's just your average run-of-the-mill, like, hey, I've ordered coffee. Coffee is a hot beverage. Don't spill this on myself. Then no standing.
Okay. Fair enough. I tend to agree with that. What about, this is something that actually happened in my life. Growing up at my old man's house, and then continued to live there way longer than I should have. We had a fairly open yard, and there was, at one point, we set up a kind of a swing. It was very kind of Jimmy rigged kind of a swing. I mean, it was just a rope with a stick at the end of it, and it was tied to a branch, and it wasn't even necessarily like the thickest branch. And I remember having concerns at the time that, hey, this is just a thing, have it on the property. But I remember hearing about those court cases and going, if some kid just walks onto the property, swings around, hurts himself, because the swing breaks or whatever, we'd be liable. We'd probably lose. What do you think of that? Because they wouldn't necessarily be invited on the property, but at the same time, we didn't really make clear that they weren't invited. You know what I mean? Like, we never went out and said, hey, this is our property. You're not welcome here. But at the same time, if they were just sitting out there swinging, we don't care. Have fun. Do what you want to do. What do you think of that one, Daniel?
Yeah, that's
Would
a tough
we be
one.
liable?
I mean, if there's a history of them being able to use the facilities without gaining additional permissions each time, that is a bit of a tough one. I think that's why we have insurance.
Okay. So you think we should have had some sort of homeowner's insurance that would cover things like that?
I'm sure your father does and did.
I think it's maybe possible that he might.
We do. It's like standard in our homeowner's insurance that if somebody is injured on the property, there's a certain provision for medical and things of that nature.
Mm.
I guess this is some of the stuff you learn when you actually move out of your parents' house and have to make it on your own there, Robert.
It's when when you're an actual adult. You got me. You burned me.
Burn, singe.
You burned me. I'm not an adult yet. It's fine.
You smell that?
I'm a 40-year-old child. It's fine. I do. It's my butt hair singeing. So you think I would be liable in that situation? If I didn't specifically tell the children that they're not allowed to play on the property, then I am now liable for their injury. That they voluntarily did, and they can see the state of the swing. They can make in their own judgment whether or not it's safe. And we're going to start talking about age of consent or whatever?
We might want to save that one for a future episode, because I think we've got a good one coming up here.
Fine. You don't want to talk about it. You want to tackle this issue. That's fine. You don't think you have an answer? It's fine. It's fine.
No, but you know what? We've already gone on a little bit long, and we haven't even done our housekeeping yet.
Oh. Fine, you can avoid the question. It's fine. Go ahead. Fine.
Don't worry, we'll come back to it. So, really? I was just using this opening segment to bring about how we arrived at doing Princess Bride for this episode. And it was because of the Dread Pirate Roberts, which goes back to providing a venue and et cetera, like we just talked about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But housekeeping-wise, this is the Read Rothbard Podcast. It is nearly Christmas. Merry Christmas to all. At present, there is Tom Woods giving a special price on his Liberty Classroom, and we invite you to take advantage of that. You're going to save a fair amount of dollars on that now through 12/30, so just over a week left, about 10 days, week and a half. After that, it goes back up to something nearly $600. So right now, you can get it for $347 for the master level membership. If you do sign up on our link, the next 4 people who sign up will receive a 1-year membership to readit4.me. And if you do want to check out the readit4.me service, we can offer you a 30-day trial in the spirit of holiday giving, and we'll have links to that in our show notes. Other than that, click on any Amazon link and buy whatever your heart desires, other than gift cards, because we get nothing if you buy a gift card. But yeah, I do it anyway. Anyway, let's get back to our show here. So we're going to talk about Princess Bride, but before we get to that, let's answer your question about whether you are liable for having kids injure themselves on your property.
You could even make it an adult if you want, but yeah, let's do kids first.
Okay. So I think it'll come down to the situation, like whether or not the kids have had free reign, free access to said property with consent or not in the past. Like, what has been the arrangement? Okay,
let's say that the kid has been invited onto the property before, and anytime they're on the property after that, there's never been a time when they've been told that they need to leave. They're just neighborhood kids. This is like a neighborhood property. It's kind of like it was in the, you've been there. You're familiar. It's kind of like in the hub of a little area, a centralized location, if you will.
Yeah, there's no fence or anything. It's open. It is central. It's accessible by anyone, right, in that little neighborhood.
Yeah, and it's also housing the mailboxes for the neighborhood, so people would routinely just walk across our property. It's shorter. Instead of walking all the way around to go to the street, to then walk down to grab the mail.
Yeah.
What, if someone just trips on their way to get the mailbox on our property and plants their face into a nail or something that happens to be on the property? Anyway, no, go talk about the, what do you think? Do it.
Well, I don't think that there's a very clear-cut answer on this. I said, it comes up to the situation, had they been invited before? Do they need to seek consent to be on the property in the future or not? But then there's also on the homeowner himself is maintaining the property when he knows that people have permission to go through it. Certainly there's some onus to make sure there aren't a bunch of nails poking up if they know people are going to be walking through there, or if they know kids are going to play on the swing, you want to keep things in good repair, or take measures to make it not accessible or rescind the invitation to play on it. What do you think of that? So
you're saying you seem to be arguing for some positive obligations here. I find that interesting.
Well, it's your property, and if you're going to put something out there that is going to have an open invitation for somebody to use, yet it's dangerous for them to use, maybe known to them, maybe not, but certainly owned by you.
Whoa, wait a minute. Maybe known to them, maybe not. They are in no way to make that own distinction themselves? It's not on them to make that distinction?
As far as they can make that determination, but something can look to be fine and not be fine. Like a rope can appear to, not be weak, and yet once you put a weight on it, it could break.
True. So you're saying that the homeowner needs to hire some sort of an architect or some sort of structural engineer to come by and...
It's not a positive obligation in that somebody owes something to someone else. It's because someone is invited to be in your house or on your property, and you have something that is dangerous for them to be on, it's on the owner to either make that safe, or as safe as it can be, or rescind the invitation to be there. Make it inaccessible. I think that there is an obligation there.
Okay, what if there used to be a blackberry bush on the property? No, there's nothing safe about a blackberry bush. If a child came over and started picking blackberries and cut themselves, am I somehow liable for that?
I think there's a reasonable expectation that people who have experienced blackberry bushes can reasonably expect that they are dangerous and pokey and scratchy. And so I think in that case, a lot of court proceedings and common law comes down to reasonable man doctrine. And that does sound super sexist in today's climate, but that's what it's called, reasonable man. Like, would a reasonable man expect things to be a certain way or not? And if they would, then there's no standing. But if they wouldn't expect whatever the circumstance was, then there is some legal standing.
Okay, so you're saying that the person with the property has some sort of a positive obligation to keep their property fairly safe and clean. Let's say if I had a series of, at one point I had received a rabbit cage, and I was in the process of tearing it apart. So there are all these boards with nails sticking out of them on the basketball court. And I even stepped on one of them, and the nail came up into my foot, a good chunk. Did I have a positive obligation to clean off my basketball court when anybody walking through the property could have seen, except for me at the time, of course, because I didn't want to look down or whatever, that there are all these boards with nails sticking out all over the place, and maybe they should be careful walking through there?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it comes back down to the situation. Like, imagine you have kids, and they go and play at this place, and they're running around and the swing breaks, and they fall on a nail and stab them. I mean, wouldn't you be pissed off and lay some blame on the owner of that property for leaving a bunch of nails out and a shitty swing?
I think I'd be more upset with my child.
Well, as the parent, then would you have
myself.
Not provided the authorization for them to go there? Like tell them, hey, don't go there, or be aware of dangerous equipment situations, etc. Like, I mean, that's what we're trying to tell our kids. I mean, ultimately, you're right. Everyone's responsible for themselves, but also the owner of the property is responsible for the property. And if they're going to have an open invite for people to be on that property, they need to make sure it has a certain amount of safety, or at least forewarning of dangerous conditions or what have you. Like if you're at Disneyland and the ride throws you out and you get injured, yeah, you're going to blame Disneyland, right? Do the pants off.
I would, but those are, you're paying a price to be on that property, to going on this ride, that you're expecting a certain level of quality.
Okay, let's change it to one block away.
Are you saying that every property owner on the planet has an expectation of quality that they must maintain?
I'm saying if you have an open invitation for people to be on the property, you have an obligation to make sure it's safe to be there, or that there's an awareness of whatever dangers you're aware of. I mean, it's going to come down to a situation-by-situation basis. It's going to be free market will determine the best way to handle it. There will be insurance involved. There is an onus on the owner to either make sure that people aren't allowed to be there, or there's a fence, or if they are allowed to be there, that they're aware of the conditions.
Well, being aware of the conditions just means having eyeballs and having senses. How is the child that goes and swings on the swing and then falls on a nail, it's not on them to see the nail there? Or is the property owner responsible for every nail on their property?
Like I said, it's going to be situation by situation. I mean, let's change it to a block away from you. So not Disneyland, but the public park there, the city park.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's new equipment there, or relatively new, at least since we were kids. And the last time I was there, which was about 6 months ago, it is fairly janky already. There's a lot of dangerous stuff there. Now, if my kid goes there and gets injured, do you think that I have standing to, go after the city? I think I do.
I think you don't. I think you just
not
told me
the
that you
equipment.
don't. I think you just told me that you don't. You just told me that you just saw it as all janky. Why would you let your kid go over there and play?
Well, let's assume that I don't know that it's janky.
You're just going to let your kid just go run around? You just say, well, it's a park, I'm sure it's safe. I think you're not doing your due diligence as a parent. I think it's on you to determine whether something is safe for your child to do or not.
Slow down there, Chief. You're arguing two sides of the fence here. You're arguing two sides of the fence, and that's bullshit.
All right, call me on it.
You're saying that there's no obligation for the city to maintain the safety of the equipment, even if something could be not janky in appearance, but actually injure your child?
Not janky in appearance, but injure a child? I think anything can injure anybody at any time.
Right, but something could be faulty, but not openly faulty, like not visibly faulty, but still fail.
Okay, do you call that negligence or do you call that an accident?
Well, if they've not been maintaining it properly, I mean, it goes back to situation by situation, right?
Yeah. But I think you're putting an expectation of expertise on somebody who just happens to be a property owner. I mean, yes, the property owner has the greatest incentive to maintain their property.
Why do they have the incentive? Because there's a risk. There's a risk of having people on that property and not getting injured. That's why they have incentive to maintain it.
That's why?
Partially, sure.
It's an incentive to draw people to your property, to have a nice, safe place.
Why would you want to draw people to your property?
Well, if you're a child molester, you want a bunch of children to come by.
The truth comes out, Johnson.
Yep. Sorry. That's why I live out here in the sticks and I had to register.
Just kidding, folks. Just kidding. You're going to drive away our 3 listeners.
That's in poor taste.
All right. Well, so what do you think, Robert? You've got the property, your house, your dad's house. You've got these nails sticking out. You've got the blackbird bushes. You've got nails sticking out. You got a shitty swing, and you got kids that are able to go on there. Yeah. What do you think? Do you have any obligations, or can it just be a fucking junkyard and everyone's there at their own risk?
So let's turn it into an adult human being with proper reasoning faculties. And he just happens to live in the neighborhood, and he's walking through the property, and he's going to get his mail. And it's never been stated, hey, don't cross the property to get your mail. But he's an adult, and I've never said he couldn't. And he steps on a nail because he walked through this area where there's all these nails sticking up. That's not his own damn fault.
Can you see the nails?
Yeah, they're on the ground.
Then why'd he step on them?
Indeed.
Now let's say that you put those boards out there 6 weeks ago, and it's summertime, and you haven't mowed the grass, and now there's tall grass obscuring the nails, and they haven't walked through your property, since the boards have been out, so they're not aware of them being there. But they have walked through the property in the past, and it hasn't been an issue. And now, this time, grass is a little long, but they step on a nail.
When did you step on that nail? Or no, that Lynch got to step on a nail, I think, back in the day.
I did.
Step on a nail too?
I did at the apartment building when it was getting built. Yeah, near the swamp. Yeah, the frog swamp. The apartments are right next to it.
Right. But the swamp got drained, and now there's an apartment building there. So you were there while they were getting built. So was that your fault, or was that the construction company's fault?
Well, if I recall, it was on a trail, and there was a nail sticking up through a board. So the board had no business being there. It wasn't on the construction site per se. I have no idea why it got there. I mean, perhaps somebody else moved it. I don't know. I mean, I didn't go after anyone. I was 8 and had to get stitches and a tetanus shot.
Well, I think it kind of goes to show what we do in those situations as to what the morality or the situation is. Because 99 times out of 100, you just go, my bad, learned my lesson, I'll be more careful next time. You don't go suing the property owner. You don't go say you were completely negligent to have this one random board with the one random nail on the property.
Right, but certainly there are situations where people are negligent, and it's not the fault of the individual necessarily. And again, it's situation by situation. Free market will solve for this. Mm-hmm. What do they call it? Common law, right? Situation comes up, it gets adjudicated in some way, and that becomes a sort of accepted standard for that type of situation. It can, of course, be modified and expanded upon later on. But I think, so long as our main argument, to boil it all down, and we're going to eventually talk about the Princess Bride, I swear, is to eliminate the monopoly on the use of force and eliminate the accepted use of force, the initiation of force.
The legal use of force.
Yeah, the legal moniker on the use of force, that they somehow have the right to do it and that it's okay. It's basically just voluntary. Make things voluntary and allow things to evolve in a market transaction, a market situation. Millions and millions and millions of events happening all day long, every day, amongst billions of people, is far preferable to having a monopoly on violence and sort of conforming everyone to certain standards.
Indeed, because one size doesn't fit all, and there's no such thing as perfect knowledge. Doesn't exist. The closest thing we have is billions of people operating independently.
In their own self-interest.
In their own self-interest, and then voluntarily coming to a consensus.
Well, not necessarily a consensus, but...
For certain things, I mean, McDonald's became a popular thing because they provided the best product at the best price, and through a majority consensus, that place became very popular and very successful.
I hate to quibble with you, but consensus means no dissenters.
Well, I'm dissenting right now by not buying a cheeseburger, but that doesn't mean that they're not very successful.
Right, okay. So let's get to the Princess Bride, because I think we beat the shit out of stepping on nails and falling off swing.
So we'll get back to stepping on nails, Daniel. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire, you son of a bitch.
So take it through Princess Bride.
Doesn't think self-ownership's real. Commie. All right. So, in The Princess Bride, it's a movie by some guy, starring some people.
Rob Reiner.
It's about a thing. Yeah, Rob Reiner, who also did When Harry Met Sally, with the I'll Have What She's Having scene. It's fantastic. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's really good. Billy Crystal doesn't do movies anymore. Meg Ryan doesn't do movies anymore. Decent actors. All right, so Princess Bride. Stars. You got Carrie Elwes. I can never pronounce that guy's name. As young Wesley. You got Princess Buttercup. I think it's Mandy Patinkin, who never really went on to do a whole lot of other stuff. You got...
no, slight correction there. It's Robin Wright is Princess Buttercup, and Mandy Patinkin, or however you say the name, is actually Inigo Montoya. You killed my father.
I'm totally screwing up. You're absolutely right. You got Andre the Giant playing Physic. You got Wallace Shawn, who's playing Vizzini. You got Chris Sarandon as Humperdinck. And anyway, it's classic. You got Fred Savage and Falk as Peter Falk, Columbo, telling the story to him. Anyway, so Fred Savage, he's sick, and his grandpa comes to read him a story. And unfortunately, the story's got a bunch of kissing in it, and Fred Savage isn't too happy about that. But what it does also have is a bunch of action, and it's got some common themes, popular themes. You got like this kingdom where, fortunately, as opposed to everything Disney, you actually have realistic rulers who create false flags to start wars and commit violence against people all over the place. So that's good. Anyway, the story is you've got young Princess Buttercup, young Buttercup, who marries the prince, so becomes princess. But at the time, she's not a princess, at the very beginning. And you got young farmhand Wesley, who, I forget exactly the very, very beginning. Maybe you could refresh my memory. But Wesley goes like on a ship voyage where he's kidnapped by the Dread Pirate Roberts. And I don't exactly remember why he went on a ship voyage to begin with. Shortly thereafter, Buttercup is kind of like forcefully kidnapped by Prince Humperdinck to marry him. And the story is her getting married to him. She doesn't want to. Anyway, so Humperdinck hires, spoilers for all this, Humperdinck hires these kind of criminals to kidnap Buttercup and then take her to the land of, Gelda, whereupon Humperdinck is going to murder her to enrage his people, seeing it as an act of war by the people of Gelda. I could be pronouncing that wrong. To start a war, so like this false flag attack. And this is all trying to be prevented by the Dread Pirate Roberts, the Man in Black, played by Cary Elwes. And it's great. A lot of funny stuff, a lot of good stuff. Andre the Giant plays the big, lovable brute squad guy. Billy Crystal plays Miracle Max in a very memorable scene. What is specifically about this movie do you want to talk about, Daniel? You talk about how government creates false flags, murders its own people, pretends to do one thing and is actually horrific. There are several violent scenes. There's the revenge plot of Inigo trying to get the six-fingered man who murdered his father. There's, let's see, there's the whole forced marriage thing That's coercion, although he doesn't necessarily coerce her. Does he? Does he threaten to kill her? I don't remember if he threatens to kill Buttercup or... She doesn't want to marry him, but he insists that Wesley's dead. She's always thought that Wesley was dead. What are you thinking, Daniel? Do you want to do the fact that Wesley was kidnapped by the Dread Pirate Roberts, but then he turns into the Dread Pirate Roberts himself? So he's not exactly a morally pure character.
Well, let me clarify a couple of points you made.
Sweet.
Princess Buttercup never actually marries Humperdinck. Spoilers.
True.
She only does in a dream, or a nightmare, rather. And she is engaged to Humperdinck through a forced marriage, though she does not love him. And then she discovers that Wesley is alive. And later on, Humperdinck says that Wesley has run off and that he strikes a bargain with her and says, okay, I'll send my 4 fastest ships with a message. And if he doesn't respond within a week, then you and I will be married. And he does not actually dispatch the ships. He actually has Wesley in the dungeon torturing him.
Correct.
And then he tortures him to being mostly dead, thinking that he's actually dead, and, of course, deceiving Buttercup. And then a bunch of things ensue. Miracle Max works his magic, and Wesley is revived, but he's not able to move his limbs. It takes a long time for recovery, etc. But there is a marriage ceremony, and Humperdinck wants it to be quickly, completed so that he can get to murdering her and blaming it on Gilda to start his war with popular support. And, of course, Wesley comes in, swoops in, saves the day, etc.
Right.
But, yeah, I think it's interesting that Humperdinck is going through all this trouble to initiate a war. To what end, I don't know. Like, how does that improve the situation? Wars do not actually help an economy or help anything. Perhaps they galvanize, bring people together in a way, like common enemy style.
Correct. They are the lifeblood of the state.
Yeah, it is the health of the state. But why he wants a war, it's not really clear.
Right, he doesn't necessarily have, expansionist ideas. At least it's not stated that he wants to conquer the world or what have you. It's not made clear.
Yeah, they're just basically saying, well, he wants a war, so by God, he'll have one. But it is interesting to note that he thinks he needs the approval of the people. And so this is kind of a thing where if he were truly just a dictator, he wouldn't care what the people thought, he would just do it. But he needs the support of the people to be able to pull it off. What do you think of that? I mean, do you think that that's a legitimate concept, that you do actually need the will of the people to at least be a bit behind you, even if it's through deceit? I mean, there are many historical examples of false flags being used to garner political support, popular support for what previously had been unpopular things. So do you think there is some level? I mean, it's not democracy per se, but it's preventing, say, open revolt or non-compliance.
It is the theater of government. I mean, we're talking about a giant pomp and circumstance. You've got these. They need the. I mean, at the end of the day, governments understand that they are vastly outnumbered by the people that they subjugate. So there is a certain amount of pomp and circumstance and theater that goes on, a lot of bread and circus that goes along to make them seem important, to make them seem necessary, to make them seem like victims, to make them seem like champions of the people, to make them seem like they have the people's interests at heart, all these things. So you're talking about famous false flags, like the Reichstag fire, which is completely admitted, like the Gulf of Tonkin, which is completely admitted, like in my belief 9/11, which is not admitted. But all kinds of false flags.
Yeah, remember the Maine?
Sure. Absolutely. So lots of false flags that, rally the support of the people because at the end of the day, they are outnumbered. And they don't want to be seen as tyrants, even if they are. I don't know. Do they care about their legacy? Probably, maybe. But you do need some sort of popular support because you are, at the end of the day, super outnumbered. I mean, millions to one. And if any of the plebs ever got around to it, realizing that, it could all be over very quickly.
Yeah, it's almost as if the argument that democracy does put the will of the people in play, though that's false in particular, there is a certain amount of the will of the people that you do need to have compliance. You do need to have people go along and believe in a common mission to an extent to be able to get things done. So democracy is a bit of a control, like a relief valve, like an illusion of control. that is used to let the people think they have control, to divert them from the actual control they have, which is noncompliance, not non-belief in authority. So they need to use the theater of, okay, we are the government, you are the government, we are the people, you have democratic control.
Yeah.
Even though that's not an actual, like, it won't change anything. Your vote does not matter. And
voting for Tyrant A or Tyrant B. That isn't a real choice.
Right, but it's the illusion of choice and the illusion of control. But you actually, as an individual, do have control in whether you believe in their authority. So it's this weird dichotomy of you do have control, but you don't have control. And I hope I'm making some sense. I think you get it, Robert. I don't know if our listeners are going to follow what I'm saying.
I try to follow what you say sometimes.
But they do need to have that, right, like you were saying, that theater, that illusion that is presented that, hey, we're all a part of this, and we need to have this common enemy, we're working towards a common goal, the greater good, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, because it plays on, a lot of what government does is it plays on tribalism. The us versus the them, the us versus the other, that the other people are not humans. So you dehumanize your enemy, you play up the tribalistic feelings of oneness and community, and you exploit that by basically drumming up this support for mass murder.
Well, you know, it's you look through history and you see it all the time. You look back, oh, the Germans are the enemy, the Japanese are the enemy, the Russians are the enemy, the communists are the enemy, and then, you know, communism fails, Russia or USSR implodes, and then all of a sudden we don't have an enemy for a little while. Oh, now terrorism is the enemy. Well, that's so nebulous.
Yeah, that's the best ever. Because you had the Cold War, which you could never really prove or disprove, and they're like, oh, this is really working out well. This is just allowing the military-industrial complex, and military spending go through the roof, and everybody's in a culture of fear and depending on the government to keep us safe, quote-unquote.
Yeah, and it worked so well that they started with domestic shit with the drug war.
Yeah, and you got the terrorism, which is a war that can never be won, just like the drug war. It's just an endless war that can never be won. So you have this endless justification for government, for more government spending. And, yeah, I mean, it's not like, you know, drugs do harmful things. You can overdose on cocaine. You can get addicted to heroin. So it's an easy target. And terrorists also do bad things. I mean, but I would argue that one man's terrorist, another man's freedom fighter. You know, you can only drone bomb so many weddings before you start really pissing people the fuck off and they want to fight back. And even though they're not necessarily striking back at the people that actually murdered their family, they want to get some semblance of justice. And since they can't reach the people that actually murdered their family, they strike back at whatever they can reach. And then you get instances of terrorism.
Yeah, that's the blowback that Ron Paul was talking about in his response to Giuliani, who tried to shame him into being patriotic and, you know, oh, they attacked us on 9/11, blah, blah, blah. I was there. What an asshole.
Yeah, this whole idea of your country right or wrong, fuck that noise. What bunch of bullshit is that? Side with psychopaths and murderers because they happen to live nearby. Are you kidding me?
Yep, there you go. So what else about The Princess Bride? I found it interesting. I mean, not that Wesley was any great moral character in becoming a pirate himself, but I did find it interesting that he spent the entire time he was away honing his craft, learning how to be more skillful, because he knew that his mission, in his mind, was to get back with his princess, or his love, Buttercup. So he studied sword fighting. He was a very smart person. He was like a logical thinker. He built up a tolerance to a poison, all in anticipation of this. I mean, this is like taking on huge entrepreneurial risk, right? Like something that's so far out in the future, yet he's preparing for it now.
Yeah.
And foreseeing the need for these things. It's pretty amazing from an entrepreneurial standpoint.
Right. No, he takes on physics or physics. Physics? Yeah, physics. No.
Physics strength. He's a giant. Yep.
No, Vizzini's gang. And beats all of them. Yeah, beats Inigo's swordsmanship, who is like one of the greatest swordsmen in the world. And then you beat Andre the Giant's massive strength. And then you outwit the great genius that is Vizzini. Yeah, you have honed your skills and abilities. I think it is interesting that he is just a simple farm boy who is kidnapped by the Dread Pirate Roberts, told he is going to be murdered every day, but eventually the pirate takes a liking to him, becomes like his apprentice or whatever, and then at one point retires and says, now you are the Dread Pirate Roberts, at that point, I think the moral decision would be either to, accept the mantle and then just let everybody go and then never do any pirating yourself, or, deny Roberts and say, no, I don't want this. But he does choose. Okay, go ahead.
I want to ask, because it's not clear what makes him a pirate. Is he a pirate because he's trading outside of the bounds of the regulation of the state? So he's trading voluntarily, and he's just using the Dread Pirate's name as a tool of intimidation to not be messed with? Because that's he does say that the name has been passed on, and that's enough to keep people from messing with you.
Right. That the name was more valuable. Nobody would be afraid of the Dread Pirate Wesley. And it's true. I don't remember if it's specifically stated in the movie, because you can be a pirate many different ways, right? You could operate Silk Road, I guess, and be called a pirate, or you could be like the pirate in Atlas Shrugged and just recover stolen property, or you could be like a Robin Hood, stealing from the tax collectors. Or you could be, I guess, what the traditional meaning of the word pirate is, and you could rob like merchants. And that's generally the impression that I get, is that you're robbing merchants, entrepreneurs, who are seeking to trade voluntarily. And if that's the case, then I'm 100% against it, obviously.
Yeah, but of course that's the story that gets through to us, right? Like, who knows if that's maybe a smear job by those in power who want to demonize those they deem as pirates. Like, it becomes a slur. Like, there are people who are avoiding taxation or tariffs, who are running goods outside of those bounds. And so,
generally those are people are called smugglers, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so it was like a way to derogate them.
Sure. And I think smuggler is, and absolutely, I mean, Han Solo is a smuggler, and he's a lovable rogue, and everybody likes him. And hopefully he's seen as a hero character. But I think in general, smuggling is absolutely a bad rap, because you are trying to service the needs of a people. Now, you could also be smuggling, be smuggling horrible things too, like
people.
I don't know, like child slavery or something like that. Right. Now, if you're just transferring people, ferrying people who have paid a fee, and you're going to release them at the end of the ship, of course, fine, you're just providing a transportation service, but generally that seems to not be the case, at least how it's been popularized in television.
Yeah. So
but anyway, we're getting off the point.
Yeah, I think in The Princess Bride, I think that he's just using the moniker, and the stories behind it may be true or not.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't necessarily participate in those things. They're more like tall tales.
We're definitely not shown it doing anything like that. Right.
Yeah.
What we are shown is him taking violent action to rescue a kidnapping victim. Now, from that standpoint, I'm 100% behind his actions.
Oh, yeah, defense of another who's in imminent harm.
Right, coming to the defense of another who's going to be murdered, or like even just kidnapped is all you need to know. Being held against her will. So he comes and he attacks Inigo, and Inigo loses, but he ends up not killing Inigo, of course. And then he attacks,
Fezzik.
He's chasing them. He's chasing Fezzik, although Fezzik throws the first rock. But, they just kind of understood that they need to fight, so they fight. And then there's a battle of the wits where Vizzini dies.
Yeah, it's curious that he spares Inigo and he spares Fezzik, because he could have killed both of them. He doesn't.
Yeah.
And yet Vizzini poisons him, kills him, and I wonder why that's different. Because up until that point, he hasn't actually killed anyone. He's been defending himself. And even with Vizzini, he's not, I guess Vizzini says he's going to kill Buttercup. He's got a knife to her throat, so he could have done anything at that point to defend her. But I just find it curious that he actually kills Vizzini and not the other two. Right.
And it seems like he could have not done it. He could have given him some sort of sedative or whatever. I'm certainly, especially since it's a bargain. It's a contract that they strike. It's completely voluntary, duel to the death of the wits. I have no problem with it, especially even though he was lying the whole time. Or wasn't he? Well, he didn't divulge the fact that he was immune to it.
Yeah, he poisoned both glasses, so it didn't matter. It didn't matter which one Vicini chose.
Right.
So he knew what was going to happen. He knew that either way Vicini was going to die because he had built up his own tolerance to the iocane powder.
Right. So you're okay with the deceit?
Certainly.
I am. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So let's see here. What else? Then they're being pursued by Humperdinck. They end up catching up to Buttercup and Wesley after they've made it through the swamp, the fire swamp, with the ROUS.
I never knew what ROUSs meant. I thought they were like some kind of a dinosauric name, like or a Latin name for a rodent of unusual size, until I watched it recently with my 3-year-old daughter. And we have the captions on because we want her to associate words with what she's hearing, and also because they're screaming usually, so we can't hear what the movie's actually saying. But they actually spell out ROUS.
Right.
Rodents of unusual size, which I never knew that until recently. I feel dumb. Nice.
No, you're fine. I don't remember which viewing I figured it out, but I don't think it was the very first viewing. So you're fine. So then Prince Humperdinck obviously lies to Buttercup. He makes a deal. He says, I'll come along with you as long as you don't hurt Wesley at all. And he says he agrees. So he's obviously lying and then goes on to violently attack Wesley by putting him in the Pit of Sorrows, I think it's called. Or Pit of Despair.
Pit of Despair, yeah. It's this hidden torture chamber.
Yeah, where this albino guy and the Six-Fingered Man are their specific torture chamber where they have this kind of water machine which seems to put pressure on your brain or your body in certain places, whatever. It's nebulous. But, yeah, so they torture him, and the Six-Fingered Man is very scientific about it. He's like interviewing Wesley as he's torturing him. Be honest, how does this feel? How does it make you feel? It's funny.
Yeah, that's Christopher Guest. I didn't know that until recently watching it.
Yeah, it's funny watching old movies and seeing actors in roles that you're like, oh, this is one of their starting roles, and then, they became really huge. Oh, that's interesting. So at this point, Andre and Inigo have recovered, and Inigo's like stone drunk. And Fezzik finds him and sobers him up, and then they hear the suffering because Inigo, he wants to find the Six-Fingered Man. And I forget, at what point do they find out that the Six-Fingered Man is in the castle? And then Inigo needs to break in there.
Wesley notices it when they catch up to Buttercup and him. He notices that he has the 6 fingers. But I don't know when Inigo discovers it. Because Inigo, I don't quite recall why, but he thinks that he needs to get into the castle, and the only way to do it is to use the intelligence of Wesley. So his goal is to then find Wesley, and he, of course, discovers that he's been tortured to near death, almost dead.
Right, because they hear the screams of ultimate suffering. Yeah, I, as many times as I've seen the movie, I can't exactly remember why Inigo all of a sudden figures out that the Six-Fingered Man is in the castle. But anyway, so
he sees him when the Brute Squad attacks or something like that. When they're clearing out the forest.
I remember that scene. He sees him.
I think he sees him and figures out who he is. I think, and then he has to figure out a way to get past the 30 guards that is then doubled to 60 guards, and then he seeks out Wesley.
Okay. Well, let's pretend that's what happens in the story, because I don't exactly remember. And I'm feeling a little bit embarrassed because I should be an expert on this. So,
that's told me you're expert-level nerdcore on this.
Well, I should be. I've seen the movie so many damn times, and I do enjoy it. It's one of my top 20 of all time. So they seek out Wesley. They hear his screaming from being tortured, and with the help of his father's spirit, they find the hiding space, and they go down to the Pit of Despair, rescue Wesley. And then they take him to Miracle Max because he seems dead, but they blow on his chest and he can kind of talk a little bit. And Miracle Max, he wants to humiliate Humperdinck because Humperdinck fired him. So he agrees to work and provide his service for not so much money, but more for satisfaction, which is another form of payment.
Yeah, and he also said that he needed to have a good reason to bring him back to life. And Inigo starts telling him a story that's like totally made up, and
a sob story, yeah.
Yeah, and Billy Crystal doesn't. Yeah, crippled children, like he's Tiny Tim or something. But but Billy Crystal doesn't buy it. And then when he does puff up his chest with bellows and he spouts out true love, he goes, oh, that's a good reason. So I will accept less money than I normally would, and I want to embarrass Humperdinck for firing me.
Well, but actually what he says, he's like, that would be great, but it's not what he said. He said to blave, which is, yeah. And then his wife comes in here and screams that he's a liar, and it's not what he said, and then she doesn't want to be his wife anymore. And, so then they give him a Miracle Max pill, and then, he's only mostly dead, and you have to wait like a half an hour before you go swimming or whatever after you eat it. And, then he wakes up, and then they're in front of the castle, and there's a whole bunch of men in front of the castle, and these men are defending this, I don't know, would you call this private property, or would you call it public property? I mean, it's all stolen, essentially, but...
Yeah, and of course they have a captive in there.
Right.
So I think they have every
ultimately
moral right to go in there.
Right. So they get a Holocaust cloak and a wheelbarrow, and they dress up under the giant, and they set him on fire, and they scare away all the people. And then they threaten
claiming that he's the Dread Pirate Roberts, because that story has invoked fear.
Right.
And so they use that to their advantage.
Right. And then the only man left is like the captain of the guards or whatever, and they're like, Fezzik rip his arms off, and he's like, oh, this gatekeep? So they get in, and at the same time, the wedding's taking place, but Buttercup never says I do. And so later on, it's, Wesley's talking to her, and she's like, oh, I got married, but I didn't want to. And he's like, did you say I do? And she's like, no. And he's like, well, then you're not married. You never consented to this contract, so you're fine, even though she was going to go and commit suicide. And he's like, well, there's a shortage of perfect breasts in this world, so please don't do that.
So true.
Yeah, it is true. Let's see. Then Inigo ultimately gets in a sword fight with a 6-fingered man and achieves his revenge. And then after the revenge business is done, he's like, I don't know what I want to do with life. And Wesley suggested he become a Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yep, passed the mantle on. It's passed several different people by the time Wesley has come in.
And honestly, he would be a good Dread Pirate Roberts, but I can't support it unless he's recovering stolen property. Yeah, and again, we don't know. I mean, maybe they are just doing voluntary trades and avoiding government tariffs and whatnot. Who knows? Yeah, if he's smuggling, all to it. That's fantastic. Ultimately at the end, Wesley's laying on the bed with Buttercup, and in comes Prince Humperdinck, and he's about ready to duel Wesley. When Wesley's like, no, we're not going to duel to the death, we're going to duel to the pain. And he has to explain what the pain means. And he's basically talking about how he's going to cut off his nose and his eyes and make him this hideous wretch, but leave his ears so that he can hear the screams and the cries of children as they see him. And it's all, of course, empty threats because he can't even stand. But I don't know, it seems to be a way to avoid violence by making all these threats. What did you think of that scene, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, Humperdinck seems like a rather skilled fighter when they're tracking the kidnappers. They are in pursuit as well, and they're behind the man in black, and they see, oh, a great sword fight occurred here. One of them went this way, and the other went this way. Oh, we don't care about the loser, let's follow the winner. And then they see where he defeated Fezzik. He's like, oh, he's overcome great strength, and then etc. And so Humperdinck, though quite skilled himself, knows that the man in black is also very skilled. And so once they discover who the man in black is, even though he tortures him to almost dead, he still knows that at full strength, the man in black would best him because he's shown that his skills are so great. And so,
I would think.
Yeah, so Humperdinck, not knowing whether Wesley can rise or not, bows down or backs down from the fight based on these threats. Now, I don't think that would ever actually happen. I mean, I would be like, all right, let's actually do a sword fight.
Yeah, but if I was Humperdinck in that situation, I'd probably try and stab him or something, I guess. I don't know. Or have a sword fight of some kind. But yeah, it's kind of made for comical effect a little bit. Because, he just sits there in a chair and lets Buttercup tie him up.
Yeah, though he does raise up from the bed and point a sword at him. And then once he's tied up, then he collapses.
Right.
So, it's in the script. I mean, that's kind of like what we say about all the movies we watch. Like, this is a little bit weird, this doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's in the script. This part is in the script.
Yeah, this isn't likely what would happen, but a lot of things are done for comedic effect in movies, and understandably so, in stories. I mean, it's what makes them fun. So then the heroes escape on 4 white horses, And funny side note, I guess you could say, Andre the Giant had severe back problems most of his adult life, especially after wrestling. He didn't live a whole lot long after this movie was done. And so when they filmed the scenes with him catching all the people jumping out of the window, those people were all rigged up in harnesses. I mean, he couldn't actually bear anybody's weight, even though he's this 500-pound man. You couldn't carry like a 100-pound little girl because the poor guy had problems.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. He did seem like a cool dude. I remember seeing stories, and we actually talked about him on one of our early episodes, where he was able to drink like 30 or 40 cans of beer at a time. And
it was more like 100 and something. He could put him away.
He was like self-medicating, like a big drinker.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had gigantism. I mean, he was going to keep growing until he died, and that's what a lot of these larger people have, especially with I think the Big Show, another wrestler that has that, where you just keep growing, and eventually your body just can't support it, all the weight.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Robert? Do you want to start winding this one down?
Yeah, I don't know if we really need a whole lot of keen insights into the morality behind The Princess Bride. Of course, false flags are immoral. Of course, government is immoral. Rescuing a kidnapped victim, I see no problem. And you're talking about a person that has already initiated violence to force someone to be in your company, and it's keeping constant threat of violence, further violence, to stay in that company, and often like bounding them. So any violence done to rescue that person is perfectly morally acceptable, in my view.
Yeah, especially when you know the plan was to murder her and then blame it on another kingdom in which to foment war.
Right.
So I think there are some lessons to be drawn from this, because people often say that the Gulf of Tonkin and 9/11 and other events like that are conspiracy theories, and it's Alex Jones territory. No one believes it, but here you have an example, granted a fantasy story, of a false flag of a government using a planned event in order to gain public approval of an action that they wish to take. And I'd argue that happens throughout history. Remember the Maine, which was one of the first major ones that is documented that I'm aware of. That was back in Havana Harbor, right? And they blew up their own ship and blamed it on the Cubans.
Yep.
Was it
and
Spanish?
Even more recent, and especially very recently, even if you believe the official story on 9/11, I think you can look to the massive mainstream media and government lying to get everybody into the war in Iraq. You're talking about the babies in incubators, the weapons of mass destruction, all of those stories.
Yeah, talk about your fake news.
Yeah, talk about your fake news. So, yeah, that it happens over and over in time. When things like this happen, you really got to look to the key bono, the who benefits, because you follow the money in those situations. Because government will do that. It is the lifeblood of the state, and they will foment war. They will create an other. It benefits them to have an enemy, a constant enemy. It allows them the political capital, if you want to call it, to justify any number of horrors, from increased taxes or any increased theft of any kind to drafting you into their wars, slavery. What do you think about the lies that got so many young people to join up with the military, to voluntarily join into the military? I mean, after 9/11, who thought that we were attacked, or after Pearl Harbor, which the government did obviously the Japanese did attack, but from all the what's the word?
The embargoes?
All the embargoes that we put on Japan.
Yeah, those are acts of war.
Yeah. They basically starved out Japan, basically kind of forcing their hand. I mean, I'm not saying that force is ever proper, but we definitely initiated that violence.
And they were aware that it was going to happen. They just didn't know exactly when, but they failed to warn the people at Pearl Harbor. And I think by coincidence or not, all the carriers were not in the harbor at that time. Yeah,
and it was they played it up as a huge attack against American, as it was. But yeah, absolutely right. They knew it was going to happen, and they played it up and used it to get as an excuse to get into the war.
Yep, and of course, recruitments increased by many-fold afterwards.
Absolutely. How many people only joined up because they were attacked? We were attacked. I mean, if you watch the Band of Brothers documentary, well, not necessarily it's a documentary, but it's a story based on the Stephen Ambrose book. But They do a whole bunch of interviews with the men who fought in those wars, and many of them said, well, we were attacked, so we joined up. I mean, so how many men, after the lies of 9/11, joined up, and then after the lies to get us into the war with Iraq, how many people lost their lives, their livelihood, had limbs blown off for lies?
Yeah, well, that's Edward Snowden joined up after 9/11, right?
Yeah, and so did Kokesh, as I recall.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, lots of people. So you got to be super careful when you got somebody selling you something, because you got to look at who's going to benefit from this thing. Because these people are known liars, and they lie constantly, and they use the mainstream media, and they lie through the mainstream media constantly.
That's why there's an attack on alternate sources right now.
Yeah, that's why alternate sources become fake news.
Yep, they feel like they're under threat. Their little empire of, I mean, like we said in the previous episode, imagine how easy it was for them to control like 2 or 3 networks for the news that you would get, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Now it's all over the place, and it's really difficult to maintain. I think that the internet is one of the things that has became this big chink in the armor. Like if you were to think of The Hobbit, which is a trilogy we'll probably talk about soon, that's the one chink in Smaug's armor plating is the internet.
I didn't think you'd make that analogy. Yeah, there you go. It is. It's a chink in the armor of the official story, because you definitely don't have mainstream media questioning what comes out of the White House like you do with voices on the internet. And it's not to say that there aren't lies, bullshit on the internet. The internet is a fairly anarchic thing where you have a lot of ideas and a lot of voices all vying for attention.
Yeah, so mostly lies and porn. Mostly lies and porn.
Essentially, and baby pictures. Yeah, it's you got to use your own discretion, and hopefully the lies of the government are becoming more and more well known, and you have a very jaded, a very skeptical world, hopefully. And when someone is trying to get your support for a war, or basically anytime when you're going to be asked to pay for a thing with your life or your money or your time, make an informed purchase, hopefully.
Well said, Robert. I think we should wrap this one up. We've been going on for quite a while. This may be one of our longer episodes, actually.
Uh-oh. Well, we're kind of all over the place.
So unlike us, right?
We're usually so laser-focused. I don't know what's going on. Right?
So that was The Princess Bride. We hope that it gives you a new way of looking at the film, maybe a few other things to consider if you do watch it again. We've been the Read Rothbard Podcast. We do have a Christmas special coming up, and I think we're going to have a special guest, and that'll be kind of fun.
Our first guest ever. I'm excited.
Yeah, I just talked to him today, and I think he's going to be really good for us. He's going to bring some of that intellectual weight to the discussion, because he really knows what he's talking about. He's a good guy. He runs the Scottish Liberty Podcast. That's the name of it. And so we'll have him on. We'll be posting that one probably on Saturday, Christmas Eve. And until then, we will wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Yeah.
And check out the Tom Woods Liberty Classroom. We're going to have that special going on until the 30th. So there is a timer on that. So if you're going to take advantage of that, do it now. You can find out more details at readrothbard.com/libertyclassroom. And there's Amazon links, there's Patreon, there's all these other things that you can use to support us. We've got big plans for next year. I can't really share too much of it just yet, but look forward to more from us because it's going to be really hard to keep us from gabbing on and on for hours at a time about mostly nonsense and libertarianism.
What we do, man. Yeah, if you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. That'd be really great. Or anywhere you see us, give us a positive review, send us a message, ask us a question. Just whatever, any kind of support is well much appreciated.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for listening to us ramble on, and I bid you adieu, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Take care.
All right, so are you in any way prepared to do Princess Bride? I know you said you're expert level, nerdcore on this.
Yeah, I've seen the movie. I didn't rewatch it because I've just seen it so many times. Do you have specific scenes in mind?
Yeah, it was a lot more coherent in my mind the other day when we were talking or chatting. I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff here, and that was in just the first 20 minutes of watching it. But that's since faded from my memory. Uh-oh. But I think that there's enough for you to carry, and then maybe it'll spark some of what I was thinking. I mean, one of the things I was recalling was that the three villains were hired to instigate a war by kidnapping her and then murdering her in Gilderland, so it would look like it was the Gildans or the Gilders.
Right. And
then it's, of course, revealed later that Prince Humperdinck is the one behind it because he wants a war, and that's, the health of the state. There's no really indication of what he gains from having a war, but he's trying to get the popular opinion to support the war, and so he thinks that having Princess Buttercup be murdered will false flag, instigate the people to support it.
Yes, that is actually absolutely the plot. And then you have a hero who is also a pirate, so he's not exactly a virtuous character, but he was kidnapped to begin with. So he was just this normal farm boy guy who was kidnapped by the Dread Pirate Roberts, who was told he was going to be murdered every day of his life while he was on board the ship, before the pirate took a liking to him and then handed over the mantle of the Dread Pirate Roberts to Wesley. So Wesley became the Dread Pirate Roberts, and then he goes around robbing people. So, yeah, nothing great there, really, other than, well, I don't know. You want to talk about how violence begets violence?
Yeah, we could do that. I think we have enough that could be a good jumping off point. I'm sure some other stuff will organically develop. So I feel like we could just start kicking this thing off if you're ready.
Let me just clear my throat. Okay, I'm out of drink. So if I have any phlegm due to this morning wake-up call, it's all your fault.
Well, you want to go get some drink?
I should probably get some drink.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording, and then I'll restart it so that we'll have a clear break here.
All right.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do, 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 do.